Right, Mary, what's tip number 4, please?
So tip number 4 is curiosity. Does the curriculum in our school, do my lessons provoke curiosity? And again, this is an insight from research, but again, it's kind of common sense as well. But what I'm always trying to do is get away from a very reductive, performative approach to the teaching of the curriculum. What I'm after is a place where I take my pupils and students to a place where they want to engage with this stuff because it's inherently interesting. And I think because if we frame it like that, it means they're then there's going to be far more buy-in for the more routine stuff of memorizing things. Memorizing stuff is actually really, really satisfying as long as it's broken down and you can see it making progress. So not to shy away from that, because kids like doing stuff that's difficult. We're a challenge-seeking species, And so this notion of curiosity, I think, is really helpful. It doesn't have to be in every moment, in every lesson, but the extent to which we might want to ask ourselves, to what extent does the curriculum of the school provoke curiosity, and to what extent do the lessons, are they provoking curiosity? And I'm not going to tart this up. I'm not going to try and make that happen in every moment, but it is just a lens through which I look at my materials, particularly if it's going to be something that's unfamiliar or doesn't resonate with the backgrounds for my pupils or students. So to go back to that covenant example in religious education, teaching Judaism, I need to think carefully about how we unpack this deal, agreement, contract between God and the Jewish people, possibly with some other examples first, concrete examples to take them into that. And so so they kind of get it. So there are some intellectual hooks there. Ooh, that's interesting. I wonder how that relates, etc. And then I've got quite an example that I just want to share with you that also links back to the story element. Is that beyond Willingham and Pinker's and others' work around the narrative elements of a text. There's a really nice piece of work that came out of Sussex University a few years ago, the Faster Reading Research. Basically, it wasn't a huge trial. You could critique some of it as you can critique any of it, but essentially 365 year 8s across a number of schools. They read in English lessons for 12 weeks, novels that are at least a year above what they'd normally be taught. Radical, we read in English lessons, goodness me. Anyway, at the end of that, the reading ages for the whole cohort had gone up by 8.5 months. Wow. For the pupils who'd been identified as poorer readers, because they weren't set or anything, everybody got it. It was almost double. It had gone up by 16 months. Now, when they talked to those pupils who'd been identified as poor readers about why they got on so well, very interesting, the responses. They said, well, we didn't need to know everything or all the vocabulary, because we could stop and ask, or our teacher would talk about it beforehand. But we wanted to carry on. We wanted to find out what happens next. Right? What was going on there? Their curiosity had been provoked. And then when they spoke to the teachers about what they thought was going on with those poorer readers, for the most part, they were surprised. They hadn't thought they could cope. That we've got lots of stuff to unpack there. So offer children this really rich, interesting stuff that provokes their curiosity, underpinned by exquisite language, opportunities to talk. Then you get those kinds of results. And on the back of that work, it's now been replicated in primary. And on the back of that, I've just started a website which is free to access. Cost me a fortune to set it up and keep it going, but I so believe in this that I'm doing it, called the Teacher's Collection, where we select texts like the Sabina Redeva, and then I have a draft plan to show how it can work, and then a draft knowledge organizer which people can download. And so had a lot of interest too for secondary. So over time, I'll be building into secondary for things like Homo sapiens and all the rest of it. But it's all linked to the national curriculum to show how this can work. So it's not just this sort of fluffy, cozy thing. We read them some nice stories. No, this is serious links to what they need to know as within the national curriculum.
Jeez,
So that's the notion of curiosity. Yeah.
That's fascinating, this, Mary. Just a couple of things on this. So one way this often and I sound like a broken record here, but one way this often plays out in maths is to try and find like a purpose for what we're doing. And often the go-to in maths is bad, because your purpose tends to be, how does this apply to real life? And it's quite tricky sometimes to find authentic contexts that operate at the same level of the maths that the kids are doing, that interest them. So you get like, Pythagoras. So you say to kids, well, imagine you're walking along the road and you see this ladder leaning against the wall and you really want to know how long it is. And they're like, kids, well, what are you going on about here? Or you come up with something so kind of complex. You say, well, trigonometry is used in architecture or whatever, but it's at such a high level that then the kids can't quite relate it to what the school level they're doing. So what I do instead, if I can't find this authentic real life context, there's this concept, and I'm intrigued whether you think this applies to help with curiosity outside the maths bubble, is this concept of headache versus aspirin, which the US maths educationalist Dan Myatt talks about. And it's this idea that before you teach students something, so before you give them the aspirin, they've got to experience the headache first. They've got to know what life is like without this new idea. So a really basic example that I sometimes use at primary is, before you teach your students how to, do long multiplication, say to them, okay, here's a problem I want you to solve. 623 plus 623 plus 623 plus 620, and so on and so on and so on. And they're like, oh, flipping heck. And they start trying to work it all out, and it takes a long time. And they feel, a bit annoyed. And then you say, well, I've great news for you here, because I've got this way we can do this super quick, and it's called multiplication, and so on. And there's loads of examples throughout secondary that you can do this with, factorizing quadratics and so on. And I find that creating a bit of a headache is quite a nice way to pique this curiosity, and it makes them then much more open to this new idea that you want to teach. So I just wanted to get your reflection on that, and whether you think, is that something you've seen outside of mathematics and something that may apply or not?
I think this is beautiful, making notes on it. So yeah, that creating the headache, which is a kind of cognitive struggle and dissonance, and frustration in a good way, is setting the children up. That's deep curiosity. Oh, there's a slicker, more efficient way of doing this. Phew. And so yeah, you're provoking that. You're setting up that kind of tension, and I think that is absolutely terrific. I think there's some examples in design and technology and art and design, etc. But I think that could be a really useful lens through which to look at other elements of the curriculum as well. Are we posing a problem? And so some of the big inquiry questions that you get across a number of lessons, say in history or RE, kind of do this as well, not in such an intense way. I think that is really clever. And I think that speaks to the particular space that maths inhabits. Now, I would just go back and just want to offer a few reflections on that idea that we need to make everything relevant. So I think, I'm not sure that, I don't believe that's the case, actually. And so I quite often use the quote of Einstein, that mathematics is in its way the poetry of logical ideas. I haven't road tested this with year 9s yet. It's on my agenda, Craig. So I don't think everything needs to be performative in that sense. We're going to make use of this, and I had to come to terms with that really early on as new in my career as an RE teacher. You got your heavyweights coming in. I don't need to do this. I'm not going to be a priest, or my mate's not going to be a nun. I had to nail this really. I don't care. It's not what it's about anyway. You're in here. We're going to have a really interesting time, and you're also going to work hard. That's it. And so this idea that everything has somehow got to be relevant, I can lead us down some narrow roads, which is why I think that idea of Einstein's mathematics is where the poetry of logical ideas. It's the balancing out of this exquisite, world. And, there's some great epistemological stuff that can be explored there, I think, from quite a young age. It's like, well, in any possible world, virtually any possible world, I understand at the extremes is not the case. 2 and 2 is always going to equal 4. There are no other claims that we can make in other subjects that are as certain as there are in mathematics, and yet mathematics is highly conceptual. So much going on there, because everything else can be contested in a way that maths can't. Am I making too many strong claims to mathematics there?
No, you're not, and it's interesting, isn't it? Like maths is often held out as this, completely different subject, and I'm always interested in where things can cross over, what maths teachers can learn from other teachers and what other teachers can learn from maths teachers. But I think there are some occasions where it is distinct, and that certain things will work for us that perhaps won't work, and maybe this is one area where the differences are perhaps too great. But you're right with the relevant stuff. You're absolutely right, Mary. It is some of the worst lessons I've ever delivered in my life start with a shoehorned in context, and the kids don't believe a word you're saying. They're like, what are you going on about here? And then you've lost them straight away.
Yeah. And then also, so this stuff is important in its own right, and it's not, and it's going to develop you into, and it's deeply satisfying. There's just a book I just want to reference. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but a copy has arrived, and it's Beyond Measure: The Hidden History of Measurement by James Vincent, and it's absolutely fascinating. The headlines of it have actually, the significance of measuring politically, commercially, and I can't wait to get stuck into it, because I suspect it's going to fulfill a lot of the stuff that we are talking about. He was on James O'Brien's LBC, and everyone was raving about it. So, of course, I had to buy a copy a few weeks ago. I'll report back in terms of how that's going.
Fantastic.